Welcome to episode 168 of Beyond the Brick. I'm Joshua Hanlon.
And I'm Matthew Kay.
And today on the show we have Larry Pienaizek joining us, and he is joining us live from a wonderful hotel room in New York City, I believe. So Larry, thanks for joining us on the show, and if you just want to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, giving a quick introduction.
Sure. My name's Larry, and I have been a Lego fan since about 1966 when I lived in Canada, and this was prior to the Samsonite era in the US, and I learned that I could work my babysitter by throwing a fit and then promising to be good if she would buy me a little box of Lego elements at Simpson Sears. And so that's how I grew my collection initially, was by a multitude of temper tantrums. There are some people that say that I still do that to this day, but they're really just a bunch of fuddy-duddies. I have been in the community for a long time. I did a lot of stuff. I was one of the very first people to do custom kits. I was in on the founding, or very close to the founding, of LUGNET. I was a very early seller on Brick Bay before it became BrickLink. I've been involved in a whole bunch of other initiatives and things. I still have a business and do exhibits and things like that, custom work from time to time. I also have a Lego problem in that I have two giant storage units full of stuff that I bought over the years, and so I'm busily turning some of that, but not all of it, back into money. So stop by the next time you're at a con and give me lots of your money, and I'll give you lots of my Lego.
Sounds like a good arrangement.
How's that?
Very nice. And that's like the drive-by tour of your sort of relationship with Lego. But I
Very
think
drive-by, yeah.
we'll take some deep dives into different sort of topics. And I kind of want to rewind back to Canada in the 1960s.
Sure.
Now, did Canada have access to Lego before the United States? Were they able to penetrate that market?
Yes, that's actually. Don't tell RTL Toronto this, because they'll just get even more insufferable than they already are.
Whoa.
But yes, Canada had Lego product well before the U.S. did. The Samsonite era didn't start until I think 1973, and so when I moved back to the U.S. with my family. Or I guess probably it's more accurate to say my family moved back and took me along. They managed not to lose me in the trip. I was the only kid in my entire neighborhood that had Lego, so it was super awesome, and it got me all the girls. Of course, since I was only 8, it didn't really mean much, but still, it was pretty cool.
So was it sort of like a cool European toy that was just like kind of hitting the streets,
Absolutely.
or was it like? Yeah.
Oh yeah, the thing that actually got me hooked on it was the fact. Oops, sorry, Matthew. I saw your lips moving there.
No, I was just adjusting. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah. So actually, the very first thing that got me into Lego was my cool European cousins. Okay. I had some cousins that were a few years older than me, and they had some very early shell promo sets and sets that Lego had brought out with the very early gas pumps that were like HO scale and the very tiny. Lego initially, their building line was probably more suited to smaller stuff because at this time the minifig hadn't even come out yet, and so like the most common door you would see was a 2 wide by 3 brick high kind of door, which is way smaller than we use at minifig scale now. And it fit their cars, which were more or less Lego scale, HO scale cars. And I was like, oh my God, that's a yellow brick. I've never seen one of those. And it was like there was like 4 yellow bricks in the set, so it was pretty awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. So got some European influence in your collecting there when you were younger.
Right, because my parents were both European. My father came here from Poland, and my mom from East Germany. And so actually I had some experience with some other building sets, including I had a pretty extensive collection at one point of an East German modular building set that I can't even remember the name of anymore. I think Der Baumeister, which is a real communist name. It means the building master. No marketing there. But yeah, I had Lincoln Logs, I had Erector sets, I had American Bricks, I had Tinker Toys, but always I gravitated back to Lego. Until, of course, I discovered Wine, Women, and Song and went into my dark ages like most people do.
Yeah, and so talk about that transitional period between like being a innocent child to being a corrupted young youth onward to being kind of an adult.
I was pretty corrupt. Like I was corrupt from the get-go. I mean, like I said, I worked my babysitter for parts. But I don't know. When I was about 12, I was also heavily into model railroading, which is probably one of the reasons I'm a train head. I've been a train subscriber since 1970. And I don't know. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. You know, 8th grade kind of partying underneath the football stadium stuff going on, and I don't know. I would look at it fondly and kind of not do much with it. And I had some abortive attempts to pick it back up or pick trains back up, but didn't really get back into it until the mid 90s.
And so what prompted you to sort of dive back in? Was it a particular Google search?
No, it was actually a few factors. I would periodically I just happened to be in Toys R Us and would see Lego trains and tell my wife, that's pretty awesome, I should get some of those. And she's like, you never get your HO trains out, you don't need any. And then when my son was 3, I got him the Sail and Fly Marino, and that was clearly way too advanced of a set for him. It's like docks, 2 speedboats, a float plane, a bunch of cool. So I was the one who put it together, and I'm like, yeah, I can see why people like this. And then we went to Disney, and it was Cinderella's castle. It was the 25th anniversary at Disney World, and they were building a 25-foot high Cinderella's castle out of more gray bricks than I've ever seen in one place before, up to that time anyway. And just kind of started, and was talking to the, I'm very garrulous, so I started talking to the model builders, and one of them was like, yeah, some mundane. Watch this. He's laughing to his friends. He's like, I'll tell you what, if you want to hang out with us, build us one of these. And he gave me one of the towers. He said, here's some gray bricks, a giant bin of gray 2x4s, and here's some dark blue ones, because that was what the roof was being done with, was blue bricks. Actually, they weren't dark blue. There wasn't any blue yet. And I was like, oh yeah, watch this. And I like a half hour later, I'm like, okay, did you want me to build another one? Because I had like copied it exactly, and it was it was one of the towers, so it was like about, I don't know, like 2 feet in diameter by like 3 or 4 feet tall, all made out of 2x4s, gray 2x4s and blue 2x4s, and that was it. There was nothing else in it but that. And he was like, "Oh my goodness!" And actually, on one of my earliest web pages that I ever put up, I have pictures of it and pictures of my kids who were then like 4 and 7. And this was when they had just opened the Lego store at Disney Disney Village, what's called Pleasure Island now. I can't remember what it was called, but and I discovered the 4559, which is the yellow and black train, which now a lot of people think was like pretty crappy compared to a lot of the other trains, but I just thought it was like super awesome, and I bought it, and it wasn't very much longer after that I was, on Alt Toys Lego and on Rec Toys Lego and talking about what I'd started and all this, and decided I really needed to be 9-volt complete. And so, look out eBay. I was, after a while. I went and got every single 9-volt set that Lego ever made up to that point, and I don't know. I mean, by that point, I was already kind of hooked into the community, and I joined my local club in 2000. Mishlug is one of the older clubs in the community, I think. PNLTC is the head of them, and some of the German clubs. But Mishlug is one of the very first.
And so talk about these early days. Like, what is the community like? Where
it was much more close knit. I mean, LUGNET was the place where everybody hung out, or even before LUGNET, people hung out on Rec Toys Lego, which was a Usenet user group, a group, discussion group, news, and I just happened to, I can't quite remember. I met John Neal was one of the very first people I met. I was already a consultant, and I was working on a project in Minneapolis, which of course, Minneapolis had the first Lego store in the world, really, at Mall of America. And a lot of the early fans in the Minnesota Twin Cities area, at that time, Lego gave their employees a 40% discount. So they all worked like 5 hours a week so that they would be eligible for the discount. And I just, happened to be mentioned something, and John Neal said, "Hey, come to the Mall of America. Let's hang out." And he introduced me to the GMLTC, which is a communist organization.
Oh, I've heard a lot about this organization. Yes.
They at the time they called it the Greater Minneapolis Lego Train Club, and it was actually because of me joining that they changed their name, because I was on a 6-month project. They changed their name to the Greater Midwest Lego Train Club, mostly just to get me to shut up.
That's great.
And the way that it worked was there's a pretty cool dude by the name of Conan Callipy, whose uncle Steve actually got him hooked on Lego back in the 80s. And Steve was sort of known for being the world's best sorter. And you could just give him stuff, and he would just go crazy sorting, and you'd be like, "What is he doing?" And you'd look down, and all of a sudden everything would be sorted. And what he would tend to do, though, we know now probably he was probably autistic. He's a wonderful person. And he would just build these giant things like furniture or bizarre, like take every copy of a particular element and just put them all together just to see what they would look like. And there's kind of a canonical picture that Conan had. That Conan is standing there with his uncle, and they had built a Saturn V, and it was like half again as tall as Steve, and basically like 3 times as tall as Conan. And it was like one of the biggest things that people had built in the hobby up to that point, back in in the early, the late 80s, I guess it was, because Conan was still a little boy. But anyway, so we would all go to his basement and work on the GMLTC layout, which was a modular layout, and they had decided they wanted to have landscaping. So it was built, the actual modules were built out of Lego elements, and they were about a foot and a half tall. So there was they could have landscaping. But of course, since we didn't have a lot of colors, the ground was very red. Everything was red. And then there'd just be some layers of green here and there, and some blue maybe for. But the way that you join the club was, and this is why I say it's a communist organization, is that, and I mean that kind of jokingly, but basically to be a member, what you're supposed to do is bring all your Lego over to Conan's house, to his basement. So the bottom of his basement was pretty much the most elaborate sorting system I'd seen up to that point. And you merged your Lego into the collective, and then you were a member. And of course, it never came out again. But the idea was that it was being used for a good cause, which was making what was, I think, pretty clearly the most spectacular layouts of the era. I mean, the PNLTC was making big layouts, but they were doing it the same way that most people do it now, in the sense that they put down base plates and then put track on the base plates and buildings. But the GMLTC layouts were basically all drop sections, right? I mean, if you've seen the layout as a drop section where it has like a canyon and a trestle and stuff, every single module of theirs had that capability because it was all brick. And where it wasn't dropped, they had a subway running down underneath of it, on the inside, and they would have little openings so you could look in and see the subway cars, which I think at that time was pretty revolutionary. But of course, it consumed mass quantities of brick. So Conan would do stuff like he at one point had like 8 copies of Airport Shuttle, and he would like sell them off one at a time and get like giant quantities of money, and then go out and buy red 2x4s in like mass quantities because the layout used a lot of red 2x4s, and it was quite an experience. And I was there. I was on a pretty long project, and it was in I think '97 that I moved on. I went to my next project, but at that point already, it was already kind of that there was this thing going on that I would post in one of the groups on LUGNET saying, "Hey, I'm going to be in your town. Anybody want to hang out?" And it was pretty awesome because people would, and a lot of times after I left, a club started because it was like the first time that people had ever actually kind of like met each other. The fact that I came in and was like a catalyst of it.
You're like a pollinator.
I was a cross-pollinator. I'd come in and I'd tell these outrageous stories and make these giant braggadocio remarks and yeah, you guys will never be good as whatever. And I think you could ask Jim Folds this. I think Delvalug got its start, and I met Cal Leapart when he was, I think, not even out of high school yet, and he was already building really cool steam tractors and things. But of course, they were all in red because that was what we had. It wasn't a lot of the earth tones. It was when the Yoda statue came out, it was like a giant ripple went through the community. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, we can actually start building buildings that aren't red," which was pretty remarkable, really. I mean, I think we take the colors for granted now that we have because we have such a wonderful palette of earth tones. Which, I mean, if you're a townie like I am, earth tones are key, really. I mean, they're very, very
the cornerstone of the. I think everyone benefits from earth tones, but townies in particular. Yeah.
Townies in particular, but I mean, if you want to build, a castle, you need dirt.
Military builders.
Absolutely. Even spacers, if you're built, of course, the Mtron people still are kind of in the red, black, and neon green era, but everybody else builds with earth tones, I think.
Now, Larry, you mentioned the working on projects. You mentioned being in Minneapolis for an extended period, and right now you're in New York, but you're from Michigan. So
yes.
How long have you been doing this sort of like project-based kind of consulting work, and how has it impacted? How has it impacted your relationship kind of with the Lego hobby? Has it sort of allowed you to elevate your involvement?
Well, like I say, I think in the early years, especially pre-2000 or pre-2002 or 2003 maybe, I really was kind of, because every time I went anywhere, I would meet people. And in some cases, it'd be a club that had 3 or 4 people. In other cases, like I said, it was nobody had ever gotten together before. And they were like, oh, wow, I guess we could do stuff. So it was a huge enabler, but as things kind of got going better, post Train Summit and some of this other stuff, that I think that tendency kind of decreased. And I, of course, also I went through periods where I was not as happy with the community and kind of did my own thing for a while, or just hung out with my own local club. And of course, the other thing is, of course, in my personal life. I'm no longer married. I was married for many of those years, but now instead of being married, although I'm engaged, I will be getting married again. But I'm polyamorous, and I spend a lot of time on interpersonal relationships rather than on Lego.
Sort of dividing your capacities a little bit more with time.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes. But I like to do project stuff, and I've been a contributor to many a project over the years. One of the first ones was the project that Mishlug did for Kellogg's Cereal City. We did a project. This was before Lego Certified Professionals even existed. So really, if you wanted a big statue, you either had to get Lego to do it, or you had to go to the amateur community. And we'd been contacted, and they wanted some stuff done. We came in, and of course, since I've been a project manager, I wrote all the proposals, the contracts, and did all the project management, and held all, was like the legal entity, because our club didn't have a legal existence. And we did a 7-foot Tony the Tiger, a 5-foot Fruit Loops box, and a 3.5-foot Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Plus, we also did a bunch of case stuff. Like we had a Sea Monkeys case, and a Castle case, and a regular space case, and a town case. They were all on display at this museum. And nowadays, it's not quite as remarkable sounding to talk about, a 7-foot Tony the Tiger. But at the time that we did it, building Tony drained Bricklink of all the orange that it had. Right? I mean, in the sense that if you wanted to buy orange, like right after we got done shopping, you had to buy it like 10 from one person and 15 from another. We bought all the orange there was. And that, of course, now is no longer the case. It's much easier to get elements in mass quantities with lug bulk and with some of the other stuff, and with pick-a-brick and some of the the professional support that the LCPs get. But yeah, we did that. We did a project for Henry Ford Museum in 2009, and we did a project recently, actually Western Michigan Lego Train Club, which is Mishlug kind of schismed into East and West halves. It looks like a picture of Tony there.
Is that it?
That is it. Yeah, that's unfinished. That was actually a development model. They were figuring out the profile, and then in front of it is a 1/3 scale model that they did to just get the general idea down. But what you see there was all taken apart and put back together with the arm actually built out to its full size and everything, and glued together as it went, with a steel armature up the middle, which you can't see the armature, I don't think.
And so this is the work that people like Sean Kenny and Nathan Soya and so on are like doing with teams of 10 people. Yeah. But this was your.
This wasn't the thing is I project managed that, but I didn't build Tony. I built some of like Crackle and some of Pop, but Tony was actually done by Purple Dave and by Spencer Rescala and some other people that helped. The Fruit Loops was done by Chris Leach, who was one of the founders of Mishlug, along with Jason Spears. Jason and I did most of Snap, Crackle, and Pop.
That's amazing. I'm very familiar with Purple Dave, by the way. Many interesting conversations at BrickWorld over the years. Nice gentleman.
That's certainly one phrase you could use, yes.
Yeah. We will leave it at that. Awesome. But very cool. I think I want to go in the direction of Milton Trainworks. That's something I've always found very fascinating. It's been it was one of the first fan brands. You know how we have like Brickmania and all these other
Brick Arms,
Brick Forge, so
Absolutely.
on.
Absolutely.
I remember like 2006 when I first sat down and started, let's figure this out. I kept seeing this Milton Trainworks.
Well, it's still a brand, but to be really honest and accurate, it's something that I didn't really pursue to the extent that other people did. If you go back to about 1998, 99, this is actually before the Train Summit even, there were a few people that were experimenting with the idea of making custom kits. No one was yet molding anything, no one was yet custom printing, but people were doing kits. And a few of us all started talking, and we kind of said, let's band together because maybe we can, do better at parting out things and support each other and like help build brand awareness and have like a quality seal. So we invented the Guild of Bricksmiths to sort of be like a sort of a umbrella that would say if you know that they're a Guild of Bricksmiths member, there's a certain quality level you can expect. But I never really got to the point where I was cranking out kits in the volume that Dan Siskin did. Dan took it way farther. As you know, he basically is doing it full time and has a number of employees. I designed kits. Did the whole thing, parting them, pulling the parts and assembling the kits into the packaging and the whole 9 yards. And it just it never really made me enough money that I thought it was like, super awesome, worth giving up my IBM career to do. But that's perhaps because I only kind of was a dilettante about it. Whereas Dan said, yeah, no, I'm not going to be a punk rock producer anymore. I'm not going to sell T-shirts. I'm going to do this. And so he also kind of latched onto military as a place where he focused. After he did a few initial castle sets, his focus has been almost exclusively military. So that's kind of an unfilled niche compared to just another train guy. So he was able to, I think, to lever up and leverage that into a full-time career. And I always kind of viewed Milton Train Works as a fun thing. I mean, I still sell the instruction CDs, but honestly, I haven't designed anything new for resale in a decade, I wouldn't say.
And I think that kind of speaks to it being like somewhat of a low margin, depending on how you're executing. Low margin.
It's totally. It's high effort, high touch, very low margin, unless you can get the economies of scale up, and you have the demand. And I never figured out how to drive demand the way that Dan did. Dan is, I think, like the example of how to do this for anybody else that would want to consider getting into custom kits. As a sole thing that you do, unless you can get to Dan's level of quality and of the number of kits that he does. I don't know what it is exactly, but I think he cranks out something, well north of a dozen, maybe 2 dozen designs a year, maybe more. I'm assuming you guys interviewed him. You probably know.
Yeah, he does a considerable.
The economy of so Dan has like the double-edged sword, right, of like operating within a well-defined niche, and then also having an economy of scale that's great enough that he can sort of execute things in ways that are like super efficient.
Absolutely, and he's gotten very good at getting the parts. Sourcing the parts was a major pain in the butt, and it's probably one of the reasons that I have more stuff in storage than I should, because I kind of blew how to source parts. I said if I buy them on Bricklink, it's going to cut into my margins, so I'll buy the sets, right? And so I ended up with all these sets that I've taken like a few parts out of, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll sell the parts off, and then that just never happened. Whereas Dan, I think, figured out how to do it. There's some other people that have made a success at it. If you look at Joe of Citizen Brick, for example, his sets are very successful, but that's a sideline for him. I think he probably makes more off pad printing than he does off of his, his art and Breaking Bad and stripper clubs and stuff like that. But again,
it's always fun to see those in the Wall Street Journal when he releases them. Media blitz.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, he found, again, if you can find something special, I think you can do really well. It's possible to make a little bit money in kit design, but you have to have much higher units. When we did the project for the Grand Rapids Public Museum, they asked us for a model to sell. And although I held the paper, it was actually Jason that did the design work. And he designed a little 55 element biplane that is an iconic. There's a biplane hanging in the rafters of the museum that was built in the Grand Rapids area in the late 20s, early 30s. And he built a model of it, that for 55 pieces comes really close to what it looks like. And the museum has sold 2,000 copies of it. We sourced the parts to them. We did the packaging design, laid all the instructions, layout, and all that. But we kind of offloaded the production onto them. We said, we'll give you the parts, we'll give you the artwork. You have to print the hang tags. You have to print the instructions. You have to have your volunteers do the picking and the counting out of the parts, because we're not going to do that. And so we were able to, because they put so much labor into it, they were able to sell it for a price point where they moved 2,000 units. But even then, it's not like we didn't make like giant fortunes or anything like that. Okay, the reason my finger's pointing at the screen is my phone is telling me I'm down to 20%. So we probably got another 15 minutes or so before my phone just completely dies.
We'll just keep going, Larry.
Okay.
So another question, sort of, I like we're talking about the early days of LUGNET, all that stuff. Very, very interesting. One thing I couldn't help but notice before we sat down to this interview, doing the legwork and stuff leading up to it, is that your Brickshelf folder is a wealth of knowledge or photos, I suppose, like different kind of events, different sort of things that you've done over the years, and obviously it kind of drops off when you stop posting to Brickshelf regularly, as everyone else seems to have. But talk about the early days of Brickshelf. When did you first become a user? What is your user number, if you know that? I wasn't able to figure that out myself. Any interactions with Kevin Locke?
I could probably answer that question if I logged on. It is a low number. It's less than 20. I can't remember.
I think it's 14 actually. It's 14. I just pulled it out.
No, I think my BrickLink number is 14.
I said Brickshelf. It says LAR, your username, LAR, and then next to that 14.
Okay, so maybe it is 14 then.
Maybe it's not though.
Wow.
Well, okay. Well, my LUGNET number is 5, and my BrickLink number I think is also 14. Yeah, I knew Kevin personally. I was on a project in DC for something, and I think this was before the first BrickFest. Yeah, I'm sure it was. I don't even remember why I was in DC. I couldn't tell you what client it is. I've been to so many clients I can't remember them all. And it was just one of these I posted on LUGNET, and I met Denise, and I met him, and he was talking about, oh yeah, I work at an ISP, and we have a lot of servers, and they're going to let me set something up on their servers because we have the disk space, so why not? And we were just talking about it, and he's did all the programming behind it, and yeah, I was an early user. I think if you look at my Facebook, you'll see, if you go slipping through my albums, which are all public, I don't make them private. I kind of moved from Brickshelf to Facebook. I mean, most of the events that I go to, if I take pictures, they all go up there. And some people have criticized my pictures. They say, well, you take so many pictures and you don't weed out the crappy ones. I'm like, well, yeah, I suppose I could, but then I'd have less time to do the other things I want to do. I'd just walk around and take a lot of pictures and just dump them. And that's what I did on Brickshelf. When I would go to Singapore or to the UK or wherever I would go, I would do that. I would take pictures. Like I met Hugh Millington in his house in the 90s. And some of his, some of his buddies, the people that were in the British Lego users group, which is the name of which is escaping me right now, who do the thing at Steam in Swindon with the big layout every year, or did for a long time. I mean, Hugh and I went tearing around. We went to Blue Water and got some promos, and people came over, and so I would do that. I would just, whoever I was to see. Or like when I was out in San Francisco and I met like Russell and other people from Baylug, Bill Ward and a lot of people that like that. Or if I was up in Seattle and I met Dan Parker and Steve Barilli, it was natural to do that, to put it up on Brickshelf, and then people would always be like, well, half these pictures are blurry. I'm like, well. Sorry.
But at least they're online. That's what I said.
Yeah.
So now let's take a little bit of a tour through your Brickshelf gallery. Is that awkward for you? If you feel uncomfortable, we will not. But I would like to.
No, I don't. I have no problem with that. Very nice. I suppose I should log on and take a look at it.
All right. So Joshua should screen share. He'll be able to screen share some images, so we have common talking points. So this is your visit to Jonathan Lopes' house in February 2006, and maybe I'll give a little bit of backstory on Jonathan Lopes as best I can. But town builder, hardcore town builder, train head kind of guy. Amazing, amazing kind of replica of the Brooklyn, done all these different, I don't know, like industrial wasteland sort of vibe going. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful layout. And since has moved to California recently, is doing commission work, more artistic pieces, all that kind of stuff. But talk about this visit. How did it come together?
Sure.
What was it like?
Well, I mean, this was the typical, hey, I'm going to be in town, and I got together with Jonathan several times because I was on a project. This I don't think was even like I don't think this is the first time I met him even. I had met him and Eric, I can't remember the name now. I'm so bad with names. At like just kind of we were just hanging out in Manhattan, and another time he was like, well, why don't you come up to my place and see? He was living in Brooklyn, and he had kind of like a whole second floor, so he had a very large room to put this layout into. Pretty large for a personal layout. And he was going for what he and John Neal called the ash can look. And it was really not so much industrial as just gritty, urban, and not necessarily the most safe neighborhood kind of look. Like a lot of the buildings will have details like cracks or places where their windows are boarded over or bricked over. He would do like, back lots where there was a torn down building and then it was just filled with junk. And so it was very much, a slice of life kind of thing. And he was, that's a perfect example right there of that one. He very much wanted to try to get, the New York, so that when people looked at it, even though there were no, it's not like Sean Kenny who did the Big Apple where it was like pretty obvious he had done a slice of Times Square because they had all these iconic things in it. This is just like Brooklyn, right? It's like if you go into the neighborhoods of Brooklyn, this is what it looks like. In fact, when I was just coming back to the hotel from this interview, I was driving through Astoria, through Flushing, Queens, and that's what these neighborhoods look like: 3-4-story buildings and people hanging out on the street corner and garbage trucks going by, and that's the look. The only thing that is different, of course, is that his roads are in better shape than real ones. But he sort of used trains more as stage props. He was not primarily focused on being a train builder. Some of us build trains and then the buildings are backdrop, and other people are kind of the other way around. The trains are just there so that the kids have something to see that moves, but what they really care about is the buildings. And Jonathan, even at this point, which is 10 years ago, was already showing some of the chops that he's shown now of this knack for detail. And there's this perfect example. That building that you're looking at right now has boarded up windows, it has broken windows, it has half boarded stuff, and it just looks very lived in, like people have been there for 100 years and done stuff to it. And he's switched scales now. He no longer builds it at minifig scale. He builds at what he calls 4-wide scale, and so it actually forces him to be an even better builder, because being at 4-wide scale, the detail level is harder to achieve because it's like a third smaller buildings. The doorways are smaller and everything. But here's another great example. Here's a building where the roof is partly collapsed. The tan building on the left is one where some of the stucco is peeled off the wall and showing the red bricks underneath. The windows boarded up. This is something that not a lot of builders do, but people are getting better at it now. But 10 years ago, when he was doing this, he was really groundbreaking, because most people would tend to have perfect, happy, shiny, everything exactly so kind of layouts. And Jonathan was really kind of showing the way. I got a chance to.
It's safe to say Jonathan Lopes is I don't know. I just for I think the biggest thing that sort of stands out in my head is that his use of color and stuff at that time was like no one really had like building a whole building in sand green, just kind of not easy, you know.
No, it's not easy. Well, and if you look, you know, this was at the very beginning of our great national nightmare of color change. If you look closely at that building, I think that's one of the buildings where it's using both colors of brown. And that's a technique that I think people are starting to adopt more now. But at that time, it was really kind of groundbreaking to say, oh, I have a building where I'm deliberately making the color mismatch because that's the way the real building looks. And I got a chance to meet up with Jonathan. When was it? Late last year. Yeah, just before I went to Morocco. And it was just before he left to go to San Diego, so he had all of his stuff put away. But he's still the same kind of very soft-spoken, very low-key, but yet a very commanding presence. And you know, his actual job is that he manages the production of children's books for a leading publisher that does that. And so he does a fair bit of overseas travel as well, because the stuff's actually all printed in Hong Kong or China or Guangzhou or whatever. But yeah, I was really honored to get to meet him. I love his work.
Definitely, he's a long-time inspiration of mine. Just one of those builders I think pretty much everyone looks up to. I'm sure he looks up to himself.
He was one of the very first people I followed on mock pages. So,
definitely.
And you know, mock pages actually is another thing that is one of these ideas that I think maybe could have went farther than it did, but it still is pretty awesome. And that was, you know, something that Sean did that for the community, really. You know, I don't think he makes money at it, but it was a wonderful thing to put forward.
And then maybe I don't know. Let's take a little bit. I was going to go on to the next Brickshelf folder, but real quick, early days of mock pages. Sean, Kenny, had like any sort of insight from you there?
We met a few times and exchanged notes. I don't think I'm probably not the best authority on the whole story behind mock pages. I was just a user. It's not like Kevin. I mean, Kevin and I talked about Brickshelf before it existed.
Definitely.
Same thing. Todd and I talked about LUGNET before it existed too.
Definitely. So next, you paid a visit to Eric Harshbarger's house. Eric is one of what would you say, like most notable large-scale builder or something like that early on?
Certainly, early days, one of the very first people to do large statues, to do mosaics, and his early claim to fame was that during the dot-com bubble, he was hired to build someone a desk because this person said, I'm really, really happy where I am, but if you want me to come work for your startup, I want a desk made out of Lego.
That's great.
And that was, I think, his way of saying, I'm not coming to work for you, right?
Because
you're not gonna. And they went out and they found Eric and said, Eric, build us a desk, and they did. And I think in this gallery somewhere there's some pictures of it. I can't remember. Because of the fact that it's hard to come by colors, it's all done in primary colors, red and yellow and blue. It's not like nowadays we'd probably build it out of all gray or all brown or whatever. But he was living in Auburn, Georgia.
Alabama.
Sorry, you're right. Auburn, Alabama.
Right
Wherever
outside
Auburn
Atlanta,
is,
right?
the school Auburn, wherever it is. I don't know where Auburn
I was gonna hit on that next, though. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, sort of, right?
Oh, it totally is in the middle of nowhere. I was like an hour and a half. I think I was in Atlanta. I can't quite remember, or maybe Birmingham. Don't know. One of those two, or maybe Jackson, Mississippi. I know I've done projects in all those towns. And anyway, I was just pinged him and said, hey, I'm going to be at least kind of, sort of close. And he was like, yeah, come on over. So he basically at the time, he was living in a house all by himself. And he had, I think it was his parents' house originally. And he had like a shed out back. And he had the whole shed, maybe it was a garage even. and it was just his work where he had like supplies. He had probably bought more 3033 bins than anybody else ever. And just had like enormous quantities of bulk brick that he built stuff out of. And all this stuff that you're looking at is all stuff that he built for fun or whatever. I don't think he's as active in that anymore. I think he's gone more into just being like a professional grade Scrabble player.
Yeah, I see lots of different activity from him on his like
Right.
personal site in regards to like gaming and stuff like that. But it's safe to say back then, this is what, 10, 15, 20 years ago, he was like very, very into building these large scale sort of, I don't know, just objects, sculptures.
Well, it's half mosaics and half sculptures. I mean, like he did, he did an Alice, he did a Princess Mononoke. You're showing a lot of different things that he did, and he was an amazing, still is an amazing builder at that. Statues are something that I personally don't find all that much fun. I mean, even though we project managed creating them, and like when we did the Henry Ford thing, we created a giant piggy bank and stuff like that. I've always looked at them as more of a way to make money for other things, like the club that I was associated with. We got tables and a trailer and all that from the money we made on the project. But some people love them and think they're actually fun in their own right, and I think Eric is one of those people.
Definitely. It's just amazing to these are people held in very high regard, and to see them 15 years ago, whatever amount of time, and in such a candid context, very, very interesting, at least from where I sit.
I think so, yeah. It's kind of fun to go back and think about that stuff.
Definitely. And I think the last sort of Brickshelf folder photo topic I want to touch upon, I noticed what appears to be a very, very young Tim Courtney in one of your photos. And I was not aware personally until someone pointed it out to me. But Tim was very much an involved member of the LEGO community before joining the company.
Absolutely.
What was Tim like back in the day? Mostly doing this for Kevin Hinkle, one of Tim's co-workers' benefit right now. But I'm always curious to know.
What did LEGO employees do before they became LEGO employees?
Yes, what was Tim like back in the day, Larry? Please spill all the beans.
Tim was young. Okay, I mean, when Tim first came into the community, I can't remember if he was like 12 or 13, and he was doing his level best to hang out with the adults, but he had invented this theme that he called Zactron. I think he and another friend, it was kind of a fan-created space theme, because he was a spacer, and he got involved in L-Draw really early. I think he knew James Jessamine personally, in the sense of having met him before he died, which most of us never did. I don't think most of the rest of the people involved in L-Draw did. So he kind of I don't know if it's fair to I wouldn't say hitched his wagon, but he kind of said, okay, L-Draw is a place where I can get involved and help the community. And I remember talking to Tim over the years about things over and over, and he was always like, well, how do we move this forward? How do we make sure L-Draw survives? How do we keep the website going, the organization going? What are the things that we can do? And Tim was never like the most technical person. He wasn't the person that did like all the spade work for the parts review process. That was people like Steve Bliss and a few other people in Germany and in the UK. I actually have, there is a part in the, it's kind of funny, I've dabbled in so many things. There's a part in the L-Draw library that's there because of me. It's a printed part. Like a printed tile. Actually, I think I have more than one. I have the vampire torso, come to think of it. but he was kind of like, because Eldra went through a lot of growth pains because of funding issues and because of intellectual property issues. I mean, at first people contributed the parts, but nobody really thought of through the whole, who actually owns the intellectual property behind a particular description.
Uh-huh.
And Tim, I think, was kind of instrumental, along with some other people, of course. It's never one person, in giving Eldra kind of a lot of the shape that it had. And he was like the first person, one of the first people to moot the idea of the James Jessamine Memorial Award that was awarded for a number of years for people that had made a significant contribution to the Eldra community. And then he kind of got branched off into, he was trying his hand at different kinds of consulting and things. And I think he actually still is, I don't know if he's a consultant with LEGO or a full-time employee or what. I never quite figured that out. I think he transitioned from being a consultant to being an employee.
Yeah, I think he was brought on for on a consulting basis for some project by.
But when LEGO Ideas, kind of transitioned from the Japanese only thing into something that was done here, three renames ago, he was pretty instrumental in kind of figuring a lot of that early stuff out and making that work.
Definitely. So it seems like he kind of found a community that he liked. Then he found a project within that community that he could kind of make some valid contributions to. And then the company that spawned that community or whose products that community was focused on then presented an opportunity, and he kind of jumped at that, and we have the Tim we know today.
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. And I would say that he's not the only person that took that path. What I would say is Tim is not the only person who has transitioned one way or another from being a fan to being a part of LEGO. If you talk to Kelly McKernan, who transitioned from being a Bionicle builder to running one of the lead Bionicle sites to becoming one of LEGO's key web designers. You talk to Pierre Normandin, who transitioned from being a fan to having went through the path of having worked for Mega Bloks for a while before LEGO came to their senses and hired him as a designer. And I don't know Jamie Berard's story as well, but Jamie also was a fan. And there's other people that have gotten involved in the community one way or another and then gotten involved in LEGO. And LEGO also had the effort where between there was various people that designed things, on one-offs. Dan Siskin's blacksmith shop, of course, is famous as the first set taken up by LEGO that was designed by a fan. And then when James Mathis did the Santa Fe cars, it's another example. But now it seems like the flow back and forth between the company is it's not common, but it's not like quite as unheard of as it used to be. So, I mean, I've considered it, but I kind of really like what I do, and I don't think I could ever work for one company for a very long period of time the way that most people do. I no longer can do that. I can't. So.
Yep. When LEGO opens up their international consulting division and just moves people around.
Yeah, the thing is that I keep hearing that they run SAP, and I think IBM would love to help them integrate with SAP better than they are now, and help them solve some of their manufacturing resource planning issues and some of their master data management stuff, which is all stuff that's right up my bailiwicks. So I've always said, if there's ever a chance to do a gig in Denmark, if you give it to anybody else, I will come to your house and shoot you.
Oh, threatening always works.
That's the way to get it. There you go. Larry Pete to the rescue.
Yeah, well, it's the old. My old staffer actually, sadly, she was very wired in, but she sent me a lot of cool places, but unfortunately she passed away. She got liver cancer and died. It was pretty sad. But anyway, that's not neither here nor there. I don't know. Was that enough about Tim? I'm probably pretty bored about talking about it at this point. You know, Tim loves it when people talk about him. So.
Yeah, we're very aware. Yeah. We just wanted to have a little bit of a detour there, or I did, and I completely derailed whatever we're doing here. So
That's all right. Well,
for that.
Okay, I'm just waiting to hear from some of the questions from Australia. So.
All right, Joshua. I think do you want to tackle our next pivot point?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to make sure we covered is something you're fairly well known for in the community, and that's the work you've done with the charity auction at BrickWorld Chicago over the years. So if you can just talk about kind of your history with BrickWorld Chicago, when you first started attending that, and then also your work with the charity stuff there.
Sure. Okay. Well, I used to have a running joke that I would never go to the first year of a con. That was and when there weren't that many cons, there were some people, myself and Abner, and a few other people that basically went to almost every con. And my involvement with auctions actually precedes BrickWorld by a lot. It goes back to the early days of BrickFest. And I don't know if you guys know the whole story of how the one-off thing that was done at MIT because Sue was able to leverage her connections into what became MindFest, which was a weekend little mini con, how that turned into BrickFest. And that, again, is pivots around Kevin Locke and Christina Hitchcock and Denise and another guy whose name escapes me, but we call him Wub Wub. His first name was Steve. The four people that kind of founded BrickFest. I think it was the second year of BrickFest that they said, hey, let's have an auction. And I don't quite remember exactly how it was that I got involved in running the auction. And the initial auction was actually not exactly a charity auction. It was people would bring their stuff and they would sell it and they would get the money. But it pretty quickly evolved into a charity auction, or at least a certain amount of the proceeds were given, or we would say this lot is for charity, this one isn't. And when I said that I was coming to the second year of BrickWorld, Brian and the Petersons kind of approached me and said, "Well, we know you do this auction at BrickFest. Will you do our auction?" And I had already kind of developed like the style that I do it in, which is kind of if you're a heckler, I take no prisoners kind of approach.
Oh dear.
So I was like, sure, why not? And I've just been doing it every year since then. I don't know that there's anything really profound to say about it, other than I was quite aware of the BrickWorld, Brick Fair kind of auction rivalry, and actually I had talked to Todd, and I had said, you know, your auctions are kind of low key, and Todd had said, I saw you in action. I think we should try you as a Brick Fair auctioneer. And I was a Brick Fair auctioneer one year, and I just totally bombed. Okay, the style of humor that I use, which is kind of a very insult kind of driven,
Insult-driven.
It totally is. It's like people insult me, and I insult them right back, and they like make outrageous demands, and I refuse to wear the tiara, and whatever the case may be. And of course Jeffrey Vines is in the audience heckling away like a mofo.
Oh yeah.
And that just fell completely flat at Brick Fair. They were all like, "Oh my God, you're such an asshole." And I'm like, "But this is what I'm supposed to be doing." And Todd loved it, but he's like, "You know what? Nobody else gets this humor. We're gonna have to go back to." Which, you'd think people from the East would get the whole asshole shtick a lot better than Midwesterners would, because Midwesterners are nice people, or we like to tell each other we are anyway.
But the Northern Virginiaites are a completely different species altogether. So
I think that must be what it is. Yeah. So yeah, I was the auctioneer the year of the big bet, and I'll be the auctioneer again this year unless I missed a memo. I mean, could happen, but I don't know. Ask me something more specific. I mean, what did you want to know exactly? I mean, I don't really do a lot of prep for it. I mean, Rachel and Kyle and I kind of go through all the lots and say, well, we put them in this order. This looks like a featured one. This is where we should have an intermission. And we've switched from we used to auction everything off, and it just dragged. It was just too long. And so I think it was actually Rachel and Kyle that came up with the innovation of saying, we'll use a ticket-driven system, a silent auction for some of it, a ticket-driven for some of it, and that, I think, by reducing the number of lots and making them really be like the cream kind of, I think it makes the auction go better. Because if the auction goes for 4 hours, it's no fun for anybody. Because you're rushing through the lots and it's not funny anymore, and you just kind of lose it. BrickWorld has some interesting items that are kind of like traditional things. I mean, it used to be there was always a quilt, and there's the plaque, which I won this year, that goes around from one. And actually, that reminds me, I've got to come up with a pink element to put on it. I better get on the stick and do that because I haven't even thought about what I want. But there's a lot of traditional stuff that gets done, and people go crazy for a good cause, really, or for good causes. Dave Sterling's, was it 2 years ago? Dave Sterling's giant blunderbuss got auctioned off.
To Ian Heath, I believe, and it's now sitting in Ian Heath's house on a lake outside of Seattle.
I think it came back, didn't it? Didn't Dave buy it back? I can't quite remember.
Something crazy.
And then of course that got Dave being pictured on a steampunk Munchkin card holding that giant gun, which is kind of cool. Which I think the whole tie-in with Munchkin is because Steve Jackson is a train and a pirate head, right? And Steve has been sort of a anonymous member of the community. I think people don't quite realize how involved Steve Jackson is with Lego. I mean, he invented Evil Stevie's pirate game, right? Which is a game that Frank Fills and I ran at Gen Con for several years until we finally got tired of it. And it really came down to, because the Evil Stevie's pirate game is something that takes up, an entire floor. It's like played on a 60 by 60 foot space, and you're moving pirate ships around in real time. It's a plotted movement, simultaneous plotted movement combat game where you're trying to sink the ships near you and plunder them. We had told Gen Con we want a room that we can lock because we set this game up and we run it all con long. And they kept putting us in public space, and then somebody would have to stay there so nobody stole the pirate ships. And we said, okay, that's it, we're done. But Steve also is a big contributor in the Texas the train club that is near where he lives, along with Anthony Saba.
Definitely.
And I think he and Guy just got talking, and he's like, let's start doing more Lego Munchkin-ish kind of things. And that's where Guy ran off that Munchkin weapon that was given out one year, and they did play on the Lego Steampunk Munchkin board with Steve, which actually went for quite a bit. So I have no idea what is going to be at the auction this year, but I'm sure there'll be something like super cool. And one of my key goals is to not actually bid on anything this year if I can avoid it, because I seem to always sucker myself into bidding like mass
There's just so much cool stuff.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah, it's kind of a problem. So.
And so, Larry, one of the favorite things about the auction for me is that sort of serves as there are not many momentous events at like a Lego convention. You have opening and closing ceremonies, but the in-between time, it's kind of here or there. But the auction at BrickWorld, it's always, it's very much an event, and so it sort of serves as like I don't know, like I always have vivid recollections of that event in particular. And so kind of springboarding off of that, would be really, really interested to hear you try and maybe give like a one sentence summarization or just like a very brief thought on like the Lego community over certain intervals of years. So going from like pre-1995 to present. Um, you could maybe just say the most important thing that happened for you in that time period, and that will just kind of maybe give people an idea of what went on in those years. What do you think?
I don't know. I would say that we as a community go through phases of
yes
of coalescing and then splitting apart and coalescing. And in consulting, we have this sort of this four-phase forming, storming, norming, performing kind of idea about teams.
Yep.
And I think there's probably some truth to that about different communities. BrickWorld, for example, I think went through some forming when it first got started and some storming. And then it was performing pretty successfully. And then there was the whole maybe we shouldn't have signed that deal with the Weston debacle that caused them, that kind of really kind of threw their own internals into turmoil a little bit. And I think if you look at different parts of the community, a lot of times you'll find that. Like if you look at Bricklink before Dan died, it went through some very rocky periods, and there were some periods where Dan asked the community to help him do things, and then basically left us out to dry. And like he said, well, we need moderators for the discussion groups, and some of us volunteered, and then he basically just didn't support us, and the community crucified us. So that kind of thing happens. It's just I think it's part of the ebb and flow of the community. But I think at this point, the community as a whole has transitioned. Okay, so if you want to try to put it in terms of years, I'd say
pre-1995 to 2000.
Pre-1995 was really individual contributors. Most people had no idea that anybody else in the entire world liked Lego as an adult, and it was there were very few pockets like GMLTC and like PNLTC where there were people that even knew that there were other people and they got together. And although there was some activity on Alt Toys Lego and on Rec Toys Lego, most people were not computer literate enough to get involved in Usenet news groups, which are very arcane compared to the web. I mean, I think we're spoiled now with apps and the way the web works and Facebook for everything. Back 20 years ago, it was a struggle to even get connected. And so when LUGNET first came onto the scene and kind of started to unify the whole community, it caused all kinds of ferment, and mostly good, in the sense that people organized. They found things out. There were projects that were organized. I can remember organizing like group buys. I remember when there was a big cache of Metroliners that was discovered somewhere, and we put together a group buy to buy them all up and have them shipped to us and distributed, and all kinds of stuff like that at the time was revolutionary for people to be able to. Post 2000, though, I think we kind of see that at the time of Brad Justice getting involved and having, the Lego Train Summit happened, I think, in 2000 or 2001, and there was the Lego company woke up to the fact that, hey, there's a community out here, and they're not actively our enemies, and maybe we can figure out how to do stuff with them. And I think if you look at the PhD thesis that Yunmi Antarini did on on Lego and branding, it's actually a really good view into a lot of this. And she interviewed a lot of us. I'm one of many people that she talked to about this whole how the community grew and changed. And I would say, at that point there was like more and more organization happening, and there were some attempts for us to organize larger things like the um, the International Lego Train Club organization was an attempt to like kind of grow some community around all the different clubs that were springing up, and you know, lobby Lego and create standards and lobby the NMRA for things. But a lot of that stuff, I think, you know, it tends to, you see things that people get an idea, it goes somewhere, and then it kind of fades out. That just seems to happen when the person who's driving it loses enthusiasm. Like if you look at, well, I won't jump ahead, but I would say that time period was also kind of like when Bricklink really got going. Bricklink enables a lot of stuff. Okay, the fact that you have a place where you can go to get parts, and it's not just what Lego wants to currently sell you, is very enabling, because you now can say, okay, I want to do this project, and maybe it's going to cost me an arm and a leg to go this way, so I'll use this other part, but at least you have an idea of what's possible. So I think that caused a lot of blossoming, and we, you know, as a local club, went from doing shows to doing projects. 2005 was our first project. I think if I'm going to try, I would say 2005 to 2010 was consolidation and fragmentation, because it was in around 2006 that LUGNET, or 2007 that LUGNET kind of imploded. Partly, I think, because of Todd and Sue's kind of losing enthusiasm, and partly because of the community getting spun up and stuff.
Yep.
And it fragmented, and people just said, well, okay, we're going to go off and do our own thing on Classic Castle instead of hanging on the Castle Forum and LUGNET. And the same thing with Eurobricks and with other places, and we started to see, instead of having, whereas from 2000 to 2005, LUGNET was like the center of gravity, we started to see multiple centers and multiple different approaches to doing things. The community had gotten big enough to where that was possible. Whereas in 2001, if you tried to have 3 different people trying to do the same thing, it wouldn't work because there wouldn't be enough people. And I think also you start to see in that time frame, in the 2005 to 2010, the people that were the community activists become less important. Okay, people like myself, who as we talked about, who, you know, knew so many people, met so many people, and in fact maybe caused some things to happen. Our importance tended to recede, and I think, and if you kind of go to beyond 2010 to, you know, to the current, there is no one person that is like the linchpin of the community the way that Todd Lehman was in 2001, right? The community is big enough now and has so many centers of gravity and so many different ways of doing things, and there's so many clubs, so many conventions. I mean, Abner clearly could go to a Lego convention every single week if he wanted to, and he's actually going almost every single week.
I had dinner with him a couple weeks ago in my
to be independently wealthy like he is. But I think we've gotten past. There is no one person who's quitting would stop the community from doing what it does anymore. Okay. With the danger that faces us now, in my opinion anyway, is we have a dependence on outside revenue. Okay. The conventions work and deliver what they are able to deliver for us as fans, not because of what we pay, but at least partly or mostly because of what the general public pays. When they come to the public days and pay admission and look at our stuff, that is a significant revenue source that enables conventions to do things. And the same thing is true for clubs. I mean, my local club, we do a mixture of shows. Some are shows for charity that we do because we enjoy them, but some of them are flat out, we're doing them for the money. Okay, and getting that money enables us to defray. When we do a charity show or when we do something else fun or when we go to a meeting, we can pay our members mileage, and it doesn't, because we're kind of scattered geographically. So you don't have to think, oh, I had to do a 100-mile trip somewhere and it's out of my pocket. So where I'm going with this is this source of revenue, which is the general public's fascination for Lego. If that dries up, I think the community will change. We'll have to retrench. A lot of the stuff that we do now, we won't be able to do to the same extent because the money won't be there. So if the general public ever gets really, really bored with Lego, we're probably in for some hard times. We'll see. Right now, the bloom is not off the rose. We're still doing great. Lego is more and more popular every year. But I think there's more and more of us. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I know, having been in it as long as I have, I keep thinking, when is this going to burst? When is the public going to say, that's it, we're done. We're bored with Lego. We don't want to see anymore. It doesn't amaze us anymore.
We will only know when it hits us, or a little bit before.
I know. Well, the thing is, usually you don't know until after.
Yeah.
Right? Like a year later, you're like, where'd everybody go?
Right. What happened? There used to be so many people here.
Yeah, right. And we keep outdoing ourselves, but some of the stuff we do is people are reaching it's probably not possible for Dan Siskin to build something twice the size of the Missouri. Right?
But you never know. But you never know.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that a lot of people are kind of we believe that they're at the limit of what they can do. And if the public wants bigger and more spectacular, at some point we are stuck. Pen lug layouts can't get any more awesome. Right? I mean, they can't get any bigger and more detailed. This is not possible.
Yeah.
Right? And at least I don't think so. And Jim Garrett cannot build 19-foot skyscrapers. Building 12-foot skyscrapers is as tall as he can get. It can't go any higher. It's not logistically impossible. So we could be in for a cropper. I guess we'll find out.
Definitely.
So if that was that, I guess in some ways we're in salad days. Really, I mean everything's great, right? So.
Yep. Well, Larry, I think that those are really, really good thoughts to end with, and I thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. That was really good. So, and if you want to just let people know real quick, what's the best place to keep up to date with the work that you do or where you post photos, that kind of thing?
Probably
where they
Facebook.
Can see that? Okay, so on
Facebook, yeah.
Okay, so I'll make sure to put a link then to your Facebook page in the description of this video, so people can check that out and follow you there. And yeah, keep up to date with what Larry's doing, and I'm sure you'll be hitting a lot of conventions this year. So if people are at BrickWorld Chicago or any of the other several other major Lego conventions, they'll be able to find you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be at BrickWorld Chicago, Fort Wayne. I was already at Indy, and I'll be at Brick Fair, New Jersey, and Brick Fair, Virginia. Those are the ones that I do.
We will see you there.
So it was great talking to you guys, and
thanks so much.
I look forward to seeing you guys. Going to be at BrickWorld Chicago?
I might. I will. Maybe.
I hope so. I will buy you a beer.
Very
You're
nice.
old enough for a beer now, yeah?
Of course. Thank you so much for your time, Larry. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it.
Very welcome. Talk to you later. Sayonara.
Bye.